The silence in the Kremlin that night was heavier than the snow falling outside its blood-red walls. The great Tsar Ivan IV, called Grozny the Terrible, paced the golden chamber like a caged wolf. His eyes, once sharp with brilliance, now burned with madness. The flicker of torchlight danced across his scarred face, revealing the years of cruelty, loss, and paranoia that had consumed him. No one dared to speak. Not even his most loyal guards would meet his gaze. The Tsar's fury was legendary, and that night it was about to ignite the most tragic moment in Russian history. To the people, Ivan was both God's chosen ruler and a demon in human flesh. He had united the vast Russian lands through fire and blood, crushing nobles who dared defy him and building a state bound by fear. But behind his ruthless rule lay a broken man, haunted by betrayal, loss, and the ghosts of his own making. His beloved first wife, Anastasia, had died under mysterious circumstances, and Ivan was convinced that the Boyars had poisoned her. Her death shattered whatever warmth was left in his heart. From then on, his soul turned cold, and his reign became a storm of paranoia and death. Years passed, and Ivan's suspicions deepened. He created the Oprichnina, a secret police that rode black horses and wore black robes, symbols of death itself. They carried out his darkest commands, burning towns, hanging nobles, and torturing anyone accused of treason. The people of Russia trembled when they saw the black banners approaching. Villages vanished overnight, and the streets of Moscow ran red. Ivan's power grew absolute, but so did his madness. His eldest son, Tsarevich Ivan Ivanovich, was the one bright flame in that darkness. Intelligent, pious, and brave, the young prince reminded everyone of the Tsar's earlier, noble years. The people adored him, whispering that he might one day heal the wounds his father had inflicted on the land. But the Tsar saw something else, a reflection of his own pride, perhaps even a threat. As the prince grew older, he began questioning his father's endless cruelty. He pleaded for mercy toward the people, begged him to end the terror, and dared to defy him in public. To a man like Ivan the Terrible, such defiance, especially from his own blood, was unbearable. The tension between father and son deepened after the Tsarevich married a young woman of noble birth. She was gentle, graceful, and wise beyond her years. The prince adored her, and for a brief moment, even Ivan seemed pleased. But happiness was always fleeting in the Tsar's world. Soon whispers reached his ears, rumors that the Tsarevich's wife had offended the court, that she dressed immodestly, or that she dared to speak too freely. Ivan's paranoia turned these whispers into truth. In a fit of rage, he stormed into her chambers one day and accused her of dishonoring his family. The terrified woman, heavy with child, could only beg for mercy. But mercy was not a word Ivan knew anymore. Striking her violently in the stomach, he left her bleeding and broken. The unborn child, the Tsar's own grandchild, was lost that day. When the prince heard of it, he came rushing through the palace, his face white with shock. He found his wife sobbing, her body trembling in agony. He knelt beside her, holding her hand, whispering prayers through his tears. And then, fury unlike any he had ever known filled him. He turned toward his father's chambers, his footsteps echoing like thunder down the marble corridors. The guards at the door hesitated as he passed. No one had ever dared confront the Tsar like this. When the prince entered, Ivan stood near the window, his long beard hanging over his dark robes, eyes glinting like knives. The moment their eyes met, something broke between them. Years of silence, fear, and suppressed hatred erupted all at once. "You have killed my wife," the prince shouted, his voice trembling with rage. "You have murdered your own blood." Ivan's face twisted into a snarl. "She brought shame upon my house," he barked. "You dare question your Tsar?" "I question not my Tsar," the prince retorted, "but the father who has forgotten what love means." The words struck deeper than any blade. Ivan's breathing grew heavy. His hands shook. He stepped forward, glaring at his son as if facing a rebel, not an heir. "You dare speak to me so?" he growled. "I made this empire. I am the law. I am Russia." "You are destroying Russia," the prince cried. "And one day God will judge you for it." The air turned electric. The guards outside held their breath, hearing the echoes of the storm within. Ivan's rage erupted. He seized his scepter, the heavy staff of iron and gold that symbolized his throne, and struck his son across the head with a crack that silenced the room. The blow sent the young prince staggering backward. Blood spilled down his face, staining the stone floor. The Tsar froze, as if awakening from a nightmare. His son collapsed, gasping for breath, eyes wide with disbelief and pain. "Father!" "Forgive me," the Tsarevich whispered, before losing consciousness. Ivan dropped the scepter, his face drained of color. The terrible deed had been done, but the horror had only just begun. The room was eerily quiet as the Tsar fell to his knees beside his dying son. The weight of his own act crushed him like a mountain. He gathered the prince's head into his arms, pressing his bloodied forehead against his own. The warmth of the blood smeared across his robes, mingling with his tears. "My son," he whispered, trembling. "My son, forgive me." His voice cracked. The words were pitiful, almost childlike. He called for help, servants, priests, physicians, but none dared to move at first. They stood frozen, seeing the unthinkable, the Tsar, the all-powerful ruler of Russia, reduced to a broken father, cradling the life he had just destroyed. The doctors rushed in, bringing oils and bandages, but it was hopeless. The Tsarevich's skull had been shattered by the blow. His breath came in shallow gasps, his eyes unfocused, his lips trying to form words that never came. Ivan clutched his hand tightly, praying aloud, pleading with God to take him instead. The night dragged on in agony. The Tsar refused to leave his son's side, weeping until his voice was gone. At dawn, as the first light filtered through the crimson curtains, the young prince drew his final breath. A sound erupted from Ivan that no one had ever heard before, a scream that shook the very walls. He tore at his beard, struck his chest, and cried out for forgiveness. "I have killed my own flesh," he wailed. The palace trembled with his cries. Outside, the guards wept in silence. The most feared man in the world had committed the most unforgivable sin. He had murdered his heir, the one man who could have redeemed his legacy. From that day on, Ivan was never the same. The Tsar, who had once commanded legions and crushed kingdoms, now wandered his palace like a ghost. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt. The golden throne stood empty for days at a time. He would often sit beside his son's tomb, whispering prayers through the night, begging God for mercy that would never come. The empire he had built through fear began to rot from within. Without the Tsarevich, there was no strong successor. The people saw it as a sign from heaven that divine punishment had finally fallen upon him. Russia plunged into uncertainty. Enemies closed in. The nobles whispered of rebellion. The once mighty Tsar, consumed by guilt, turned even more violent and unstable. He punished those he imagined had tempted his son to disobey him. Entire families were executed without trial. But each act of vengeance only deepened his torment. He saw his son's face everywhere, in dreams, in the candlelight, in the shadows that followed him down the corridors. The walls of the Kremlin seemed to echo with the prince's dying words. In his final years, Ivan's health deteriorated. His once booming voice became a hoarse whisper. He would mutter prayers constantly, striking his chest with trembling hands, trying to atone for his crime. Those who served him said he slept with his son's bloody robe folded beside his bed, a relic of his eternal remorse. The empire he left behind would suffer chaos for generations, for his second son was weak, unfit to rule, and his death marked the beginning of Russia's time of troubles, a dark age of famine, war, and false czars. History remembers Ivan IV as a monster, yet perhaps the cruelest punishment of all was his own conscience. He had conquered kingdoms, terrified his people, and destroyed his enemies. But in the end, he destroyed the only person who truly loved him. The portrait of the Tsar holding his dying son, painted centuries later by Ilya Repin, would immortalize that moment of horror and despair. In it, the mighty ruler's eyes are wide with madness and grief, his hands trembling as if trying to hold on to what he can never restore. Ivan the Terrible died years later, alone and haunted, collapsing during a game of chess. Some say that in his final moments, he whispered his son's name. No throne, no crown, no empire could wash away that single sin. For all his victories and power, history would forever remember him not as the ruler who built Russia, but as the father who killed his own son.